about this question. Can Christians who are unable to conceive, to have children, turn to IVF? All right? So over the last couple of weeks, something popped up. Some of you may know the background. Some of you probably wondering about this as well because something came up. So now I want to say clearly, it's not someone in church went for IVF, right? Just in case you're thinking, no one in church went for that. But I think it's time to cover it in greater detail because I think there's some confusion out there. And I want the church to be very clear from the Bible about what the Christian should believe. And I don't think we even have wriggling space to say that it depends on personal view in the church, all right? I'll explain why. So now the question is, can Christians who are unable to have children turn to IVF? Now, what is IVF? To give a formal definition, in vitro, which means IVF stands for in vitro fertilization, all right? It is, in vitro means in a dish. So I have a dish there, right? Literally like your chemistry class, a dish, right? In the dish, fertilization, which takes place outside the body, okay? So for the young ones, you may wonder what it is. So sometimes couples, they cannot conceive, they're unable to have a baby. Now the scientific world has this way out for you, right? They take the eggs from the woman, and then they out of the body, and then they fertilize it in a dish with the sperm, and then it becomes, so after they fertilize it, then they choose the good ones, and then they put it back into the lady, and then hopefully from there, the chances of having a baby significantly increases. Okay, so that is what IVF is. People who cannot have children, they turn to this in the world today. Should Christians turn to that? Now, that is the question. Right? It's been coming up again and again. And let us settle it technically and biblically once and for all. Now, why is this coming out more often now? Because it's an increasing popularity and acceptance in the world, even among Christians, because of inability to conceive. Now, just realize that Medicare covers some of these costs, right, for fertility treatments and assisted reproductive treatments. Assisted means some way to help you. So IVF is actually covered partly by Medicare. So it becomes even more attractive, right? Bulk billing clinics as well. So IVF success rate also have increased significantly. So suddenly, they realize, wow, people cannot have baby. This is a very good alternative. So Christians get very excited as well, especially those who really want children. Now also for singles who they want to have children, right, but do not want to get married. And now especially homosexual couples. Obviously homosexual couples cannot conceive. So it's a very viable option and probably the only option besides, well, adoption. Now, and it is shocking. Parents, please be aware. Children books today promotes IVF to children and even explain to them the whole process, but without telling them many other details. But so children will grow up thinking, if I can't have children, IVF. Right? We live in a scientific world, advancements of science. Science have made so many things possible. So now if I can't have children, this is what I'll jump to, correct? Now, there is a lot more than meets the eye. So now, I give you a more summarized form of what I just explained. So now what do? First of all, they give you some medication to stimulate production of multiple eggs, right? In fact, as many eggs as possible. So when they have many eggs in a lady, then they will retrieve, right, this egg medically, all right? And then they inseminate and fertilize these eggs in a dish, and then they let it, basically is an embryo culturing in a dish. Now there is something that they include at this stage as well, which is called pre-implantation genetics diagnosis, PGD. So the Christian must be aware of all these things because Your friends may ask you, and you may even think about this, consider this. Now, what is this PGD? I'll run through it later on, all right? I think I'll have it later on, PGD. Now, and then after that, they transfer the embryo, all right? Transfer the embryo. Either they transfer it into the woman, or they store it, okay? We talk about that more, but they call it embryo transfer, okay? Transfer out of the dish, in other words. Now, what is an embryo? This is from a medical website. Well, male and female genetic materials, in other words, DNA. In an embryo, DNA exists, all right? DNA exists in it, is formed. So there is DNA. If there's DNA, it's basically, it is a being, all right? Alive. Day 3, embryo at the 8-cell stage, 6 cells are visible. So now the development of it, you can begin to see these are living, is a living thing, growing, developing, not saying stagnant. Now day 5, high quality blastocyst embryo. Right? This is when it is in a good state where you can take it and transfer it into the woman, because at this stage it is a good potential of pregnancy that can result in the womb, in the woman, all right? That can actually develop into a birth. So the point is this is an embryo. It's, even in science, they realize it's a growing thing. There's DNA, it's developing. Now, storage of embryos. Now we talk about storage of embryos. Now, vitrification is, well, without going through all this detail, basically the embryos are suspended in a drop of fluid on a tool with a tiny hook at the end. The droplet is lowered into a metal block that has been cooled by liquid nitrogen, where it hardens into a glass-like bead. The frozen embryos are then stored individually in a labeled can in a liquid nitrogen DIWA, right, storage vessel. So I want you to actually visualize and know, this is what this life, this is how this life is treated, okay? Now, in fact, I forgot to say something. If any, in your heart think, well, I'll just do it secretly. You have to begin to understand what happens to this life, And if any feel that, well, for the sake of having children, I'm willing to go through it. Think of all this that is happening if you engage in IVF. Right? So now they're 7,000 times quicker than slow freezing, resulting in dramatic increase in pregnancy rate. So the scientific fact is pregnancy rate are very, very high. So the temptation is very strong for those who really want to have children. Now I begin here. Why Christians cannot resort to IVF? So we understood the process. Now the Bible is very clear. It may not be totally new verses to you, but here, now let us read Psalm 71, verses 5 to 6 reading. For thou art my hope, O Lord God. Thou art my trust from my youth. By thee have I been holden up from the womb. Thou art he that took me out of my mother's bowels. My praise shall be continually of thee. Now here, the next few slides is to prove to you that it's not just, well, a nameless cell that has no DNA, nothing. But the Bible explains to us about birth. God says that by thee I've been holden up from the womb. All right, the life begins in the womb. The life begins the moment the sperm and the eggs come together and a life is formed. It is alive. I've been holden up from the womb. So this insemination process is the beginning of life. Now then, Psalm 139, 14 to 17, let's read together. I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are thy works, and that my soul knoweth right well. My substance was not hid from thee when I was made in secret, and curiously wrought in the lowest part of the earth. Thine eyes did see my substance, yet being unperfect. And in thy book all my members were written, which in continuance were fashioned when as yet there was none of them. How great, how precious also are thy thoughts unto me, O God. How great is the sum of them. Now here, scriptures is very explicit. Members are already forming. That's why they begin to see the stages. Of course, the later stage, you literally will see the little hands and so on. But they are all, it's life, it's developing, it's a life that is developing a body, okay? But it's alive. And here it says, although people don't see it, it seems secret. It seems like just, well, we saw that picture. We saw that picture, right? It's just like that. It's like a secret to men. What is in there? We don't know. But God says that thy eyes did see my substance yet unperfect. So even though it is not perfect, it has not formed into hands, eyes, and so on, but yet God sees my substance, my DNA, my forming, God sees. So God has already formed a life, or rather a life has been formed in there, all right? And he says, which continuance were fashioned, when as yet there was none of them, right? Wait. You see any, this is none of them. You don't really see the form, but it is life already, all right? As yet there was none of them, but you already know me. I'm alive. And your thoughts, there were thoughts of me towards you. It's not a cell that has no life, and God don't think about the cell. It's already a living life, and God has thoughts about this life. So my point here is, once the insemination occurs with the egg, and then it is that cell is, or that what I show here, all right, this embryo is a human life from scriptures. Now again, more description from other parts of scriptures that are very similar. Before I formed thee, God says, before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee. All right? It's not a nameless living cell that is not a human life. And then it says, the Lord have called me from the womb, from the bowels of my mother. Right? I was a living life in there, and God calls me in there. So it is not just, well, not a life, it's just a thing, treated as a thing. So any who think of IVF, you must know, these things in the dish, the moment a life begins, it is alive. Alive. You put that life through all this. Now, next. Now here, of John the Baptizer, but the angel said unto them, Fear not, Zacharias, for thy prayer is heard, and thy wife Elizabeth shall bear thee a son, and thou shalt call his name John. You see, this life in the womb, God already has a name for it. It's a living thing. Not wait till, well, it comes out of the womb, then I'll give it a name. As far as God is concerned, which is what matters the most, it is alive, that God will even give a name to. The Christian must not look at this and say, oh, it's just some cells in there. That is all. Every single one of them is alive. All right? And even for Christ, and behold, thou shalt conceive in thy womb, and bring forth a son, and shall call his name Jesus. It's already alive, and God knows the life, and God gives, and this is the same process for Jesus Christ, the Son of God. Of course, it's through virgin birth, all right? Through him, in that sense, it's different. But the point is, it's alive in the womb. Now, and it's not random, all right? It's not random. It's not, I accidentally have Jesus mixed Jesus and John the Baptizer's place in the womb. It's very precise. All right, so we have gone through this. And it says, But now, O Lord, thou art our Father, we are clay, and thou art potter, and we are the work of thy hand, even in the womb. It's a living thing that God works, that gives life to. It is something that will happen. A life happens. Now, so consciousness in the womb, again, it is not just a cell. There is a consciousness in the womb where John the Baptizer can kick, can move, right? And when it came to pass that when Elizabeth heard the salutation of Mary, the babe leaped in her womb. Now, all these are showing the progression of the life. Now, God alone is the giver and creator of life, and He's the only one that has the right to end life. And we learn in 10 Commandments, thou shalt not kill. What are the duties of the 6th commandment? Right? To preserve the life of others, ourselves and others. That is how the Westminster rightly put it. Preserve life of ourselves and others. Thou shalt not kill. Now, why do I bring this up? Because this discarding of the remnant formed life, right? I want to put it that way, is murder, is killing. Why did I take time to prove to you is life? These things. And I'll show you afterwards how they discard, the options to discard and all that. But these that are discarded, they will choose and then they put in. The rest, well, they store and after some time they discard. I'll show you what they do. But discarding of that is murder. Now, I will call this mass murder. You know how Satan is? Incite men to promote abortion. Now, to deceive men into breaking this sixth commandment with even more hideous ways, offering you mass abortion, right? It is that. So I hope that it sinks into us. Whatever you hear, whatever people talk about that is okay, whether people do it, it does not matter. It is murder. Please keep that strong and foremost in your heart, young ones. Right? When you read those books that your friends lend to you or through school or whatever, libraries, understand how the world thinks and how the Christian must think. Thou shalt not kill. Now, God says, and surely your blood of your lives will I require at the hand of every beast, will I require it at the hand of man, at the hand of every man's brother will I require the life of man. And whoso sheddeth man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed, for in the image of God made he man. So God makes this very clear about taking life. A life for a life. If you commit murder, you kill a life. Discarding or choosing to be in IVF, knowing that eventually the unused ones will be discarded. There are other options, I know, I'll talk about that. But knowing this option is a premeditated killing. Please know that. And God says, I require life of the man who does that. It's very serious. Now, we should not say, or maybe I'll give you further. This is the strongest proof. If men strive, if two persons fight, and hurt a woman with child, she's pregnant, so that the fruit depart from her, all right, and yet no mischief follow, he shall be surely punished, according to the woman's husband will lay upon him, and he shall pay as the judges determine. And if any mischief follow, then thou shalt give life for life. If a woman is pregnant, and as a result, the life in her dies because of it. It's a life for life. That is how God views life in the womb. It is alive to the point where God says, if the child dies in the womb because of you, you are liable. It is not only when the child comes up, then now it's a human being, all right? Then it's considered murder. Abortion and discarding this life, it's not murder. God says, I will require life for life. This is the strongest proof, Christian, that IVF is something that cannot be condoned because of how the other living life will be basically killed, discarded. That's murder. God says, and I for an eye, tooth for tooth. Well, so here God says there is consequences, and God will hold people accountable. Now I want to make this extremely clear. I hope you kind of pay attention now. So this is clear now. Maybe I ask you a question. Should Christians not turn to IVF because God has shut up the womb? I ask again and you think carefully. Because some people say if God shut up the womb, then accept God's will. So that's the reason why you should not go for IVF. You following me? It's God's will. God shut up the womb. So why must you consider IVF? So I ask you the question. Should Christian not resort to IVF because God has shut up the womb and therefore the Christian must submit to God's will? Maybe now I ask the teens. All right, I ask Phoebe. You understand the question? Should a Christian say, God has shut up my womb, so this is God's will, so I should not go for IVF? Should a Christian say that is the reason? No. So what should be the reason? This is murder. This is killing. It is not about God shut up your womb, therefore, then let's accept it, don't go for IVF. No, IVF is murder. Full stop. Simple as that. All right? So please have the right reason why you don't choose IVF, okay? Now, some IVF centers have options for pre-implantation genetic testing. Now, here is where I talk about this. Remember I said, now when in this dish, you should understand all this, right? So you know when I say all this is to help you understand, because some people will talk to you. No, it's all right, and they paint a lot of things. You know, this is actually very good. You need to understand what they're talking about and what it means. Now, so this PGT, embryo culturing, pre-implantation, genetic diagnosis. Now I'm going to talk about this. So they culture the thing in the dish, right? Now, how did they choose? Now, one of the ways they choose, and I'm not saying that this is always the way, but you have an option. You have an option to tell them to do this. Right? So look at here. So the egg plus the sperm, embryo created. All right, using IVF in the dish. Now, so you see the dish there, then all this development occurs. Now, but in there, they will choose. They will choose. Now, if you have certain specific genetic disorder propensity, maybe in your family, there's particular, you tend to get cancer or whatever is this, you're predisposed to certain things. Now, at that point in the dish, they can choose. So people say, you know, it's actually very good for you because you can change your life, you know. Your family all the way have all these kind of diseases. Don't you want at some point you break that, right? And then from your child onwards, there's no more predisposing to that. So it's very attractive sounding. See, it's good, right? What's so evil about that? So now, so they choose those specific genetic disorder. If the diagnosis is there, they discard it. Means they say, will probably become someone who will have a predisposition to cancer or to whatever it is, all right? Now then, those that are not there, well, the unaffected embryo, they transfer to the uterus, number one, or number two, they freeze it for possible transfer in a later date, okay? So, now, what do you think of this? Thomas? No, teens Q&A, teens. Isaac, what do you think of this? So they choose, this one are the best. Okay, then those may have problem. We think it's going to happen, throw it away. What is this called? That's still murder. All right, I know that. But Jedida. They're acting like who? Say again? They're acting like God, okay. True, they're acting like God. But even God allows, right, certain genetic disorder. They're acting like a person called start with H, Hitler. I decide these genes should survive. These genes, not so good. Not the best genes, right? I decide who gets to live. Right now, play God. I decide people with what kind of characteristics physically, genetically gets to live. It's basically that. But it's presented as a very nice sounding thing to you. Can you decide? We read earlier on, right? Certain illnesses are from God, or we have not read. We'll come to that. All right? So basically, they propound that and say from here onwards, your line will be good. It's very attractive. You see how attractive it is to the people of the world? Masking all the rest of the thoughts. Okay, so now it gives parents the right to terminate life based on possible, presumed, anticipated health issues. Now the parents get a choice to do that. We must submit to God's will. Now, please know that. Behold, God said, behold, I bring them from the north country and gather them from the coast of east, and with them the blind and the lame and the children and the woman with child and that travaileth with child together. When God says, I bring people back, God says, no, I will only choose those that are genetically very good. God says, even the lame, even the blind, I bring them back. They shall come back. Who are we to say that? Well, we do not want people that may become blind. Now, I think that's the strongest. And Jesus passed by, he saw a man which was blind from his birth, and his disciples asked, saying, Master, who did sin, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? And Jesus answered, neither had this man sinned nor his parents, but that the works of God should be made manifest in him. But that God allows certain, what we call genetic dysfunction, and they're born blind or lame. But God says, it's up to God. God planned it. But it's the works of God. Number one, it's the works of God. Number two, that the works of God may be made manifest in him, may be glorified. So we cannot be the one that decide, oh, these genes are no good and not good. So there is another big problem there, all right? It's optional, all right? I'm not saying that they always do that, but you have a choice, but a very attractive choice. Now I come to the part about what happens to the embryo. So there's this concept which they will sell to you, even to Christians. There's this concept. Well, I know you worry about this killing and all that, but you have options. So you go to our Australian website, so you see the options. You have options. Well, you can donate the embryos. You see, you can donate them. Why are you so worried about this? So your heart begins to say, I never thought of donation. Well, you can donate to known recipients. Someone in church that you know, right? Your church have people who cannot conceive, so you can donate to them. You know, you spend the money, two for the price of one, right? So donate. They may not be able to afford it. It's quite very expensive. Now, or to unknown recipients, all right? So you say, or to unknown recipients. Now, by the way, to unknown recipients, from what I can see, you by and large have a choice. Yeah, right? So you can say, oh, you're Christians. You do not want to donate to homosexuals. We understand. You can tell us and we won't donate it to whoever. You state the conditions. So you have that option as well. So suddenly the Christians say, come on, Pastor, so there's no killing. Donation, and I can control who I donate to. Doesn't it sound very attractive? Or you can donate to research. And they say, no, research, because after research, what do you do with the remaining? Research, you poke all sorts of things. It's not going to work after that, So they will discard it. So research, no, but the first two seems within my control, seems like no murder. I think we should just secretly go ahead with it. Is that how you're going to think? Well, then you have to know the process of what happens, which is why I want to cover this in greater detail. Because some may think that, well, there's an option. Why are we taking this stand? But really, what happens beyond that? They may not tell you. You better understand. What happens beyond this period, the storage? Now, how long can you store embryos? First, understand that. Now, HRT Act, I think it's Western Australia Act. Now, it permits the storage of embryos for a period up to 10 years. So don't think, well, I donate to unknown people, then fine, I walk away. There's no murder involved. But please know, they will store it up to 10 years only. What do you think they do with it after that? They destroy it. Murder still occurs. You make the choice still. So don't think that there's nothing beyond that and you're absolved from it. If you want to extend the period, well, the consent to let you extend must be related to probable future implantation of the embryo or its probable future use under research. So they say the only reason why we'll allow you to extend if you keep asking us to extend is, you can show to us that, well, you are going to use this for future implantation into a human being. That's okay, then extend it a bit more. Or to use it for research. Research, of course, is a big no-no. Okay? It's a big no-no. They said, well, then I asked for extension. But even the governments, they say indefinite storage of embryos is arguably not ethical. They are not for you to extend. They say it is not ethical. At some point, they will say it's not ethical anymore. Now, don't you find this statement quite strange? JB, do you find it strange, this statement? Government say it's not ethical. Why is it strange?
Well, I'm assuming that the reason they would find it not ethical is because you're kind of like holding back life.
Very good. Even they, somewhere in them, their conscience, although they say, it's okay to kill it and all that, it's not killing, all right? Don't think of it that way. When we discard of it, it's not killing. But yet, in somewhere in the heart, they feel that, I think it's alive, and you just keep holding it like that. It's just ethically not good. So please don't think you can just, well, there won't be killing involved, and this will keep extending forever. Even they won't allow you to do that. Right? So don't be so happy and say, there's Medicare, there's bulk billing, and then, I get to choose, and now, well, I can just leave it for someone else. No, it will be destroyed eventually. Now, in Western Australia, donors are limited to a maximum of 5 families through donation, excluding their own. A person conceived with the assistance of donor from 2004 onwards has the right to identify the information about their donor once they have reached age of 16. Okay, so these are some things I just thought is important for you, interesting for you to know. But up to 5, if they harvest a whole bunch of it, you can say, then give 20 away. But as far as I understand from donor-assisted conception, the RTC website, this is what they clearly state. Unused embryos are killed and disposed of. They are a person. It is not because you cannot conceive, so you should not have IVF. It's God's will. No, it's because it is murder. Now, donating for research, embryos offered for research may be discarded. This is because many more embryos are donated to research than are needed. So don't be so happy about, well, out of sight, out of mind, and so on. But let me see. Yeah. All right, so I'm running short of time. I want to get to a certain thing. Now, so basically, embryos are allowed to succumb on the premises, are only allowed to be succumb on the premises license. So they succumb. So they succumb. Succumb means die, okay? They don't say die. Because it's not live, right? So, but if it's developed in these premises, then they must be led to succumb there. You cannot bring it home. Under certain circumstances, then they allow you to bring it home. Now, so but they say, all right, people who are involved in this business must provide information of how the embryos, removal of embryos to storage, participants, protocols in place, that make sure the disposal are respectful disposal and all that, okay? So they have all this in place, which you may feel, it will be respectful, okay? But it is still murder. You say, I will give someone a respectful burial. Then you kill the person. Does it make it right? Respectful discarding is still murder. Now the disposal, all right? This last one. I want you to think about the disposal. These embryos are sealed in fine plastic tubes, like straws. Then if the disposal, they remove from the cold storage, left at the room temperature for at least 24 hours, then they are thrown away, discarded, right? It may be possible to take the embryos home after they have been allowed to succumb in the laboratory. That's the only situation where you're allowed to bring it home. Now think about this. The safekeeping of abandoned embryos raises ethical questions, okay? Frozen embryos in storage. In the UK alone, there are 52,000 floating lives. 71,000 in Australia, even higher. So it's quite popular here. 400,000 in the US. Poor embryo qualities. that fail to qualify for embryo transfer, they are typically just discarded. So you say, oh, you store for me, all right? You store for me. There's no guarantee that they will really store it for you. They just go through. Some of it is not very good. They may just discard it. Now, here is where, how do they discard it? What is done? It's very gruesome. It's very horrible. All right. Look at the second column from your left. Disposal, different responses on how IVF lab dispose the embryos. So they interview across the world. What are the practices? It's really horrible, right? Well, they expose it to ambient temperature, all right? Then after that, they throw it in waste containers. This like after you cook, they say, oh, this extra container, throw the rubbish inside. Or 24-hour exposure to room temperature, dispose into trash cans. But the nice thing is it designated trash cans, all right? So there's recyclable and designated. It all sounds like very, very ethical and nice, right? Leave embryos to thaw and expose them to high temperature, right? This is infant cremation. This is what it is. Now, the reason I want to show you this, and I'm glad someone went like that, because people don't think about this, and they think it's nothing. And they say we're just making a big deal out of it. It's infant cremation. Unload embryos and, well, place them in the clinical, or the waste bin, they're not rubbish waste bins, they're clinical waste bins. Place straws in waste bins. Unwanted embryos, well, transferred to lab for training purposes. Training. This is a life that's used for training purposes. Parent, can you imagine that? Well, they say, well, prior consent is given. Well, this is I spoke about it. Frozen embryos to send to companies, and they dispose it for a fee. Or frozen embryos are given to the patients in a can. All right? So this is how life is treated. Okay, so I want you to have an understanding, a picture of what this is. And I close with this. Now, once you turn 36, your chance, this is what medical science say is typical, your chance of conceiving naturally is halved to your chance of conceiving when 20 years. At 41, the chance falls to 44%. Success rate for couples per month of trying IVF, of natural conception is this, okay? Now, why this woman is born with 2 million eggs? So they get all these scientific things. Now, number one, it makes you very worried. I'm getting older, I cannot. So IVF, just don't think about this. The temptation is there. If God wants you to have a child, can you have a child? Right? We're not talking about 100 years old, right? Those exceptions in biblical times for God's purpose. But what can? You do not need to resort to this. But if God doesn't want you to, we've mentioned many times, adoption is an option, all right? But my point also is, please do not delay, right? Please do not delay. Although the fact is, for men, is less of a problem, but it is still a problem, okay? Less, but it's still a problem. So fertility rates, Australian people, women having less children. Now my point is this, back to family seminar, please do not delay. If it is God's will, all right? Men, don't be passive and just, okay, Sarah, whatever will be. When I feel like it, then I'll think about this thing. If you believe God's will for you to get married, please pray and please do what is needed. I'm not pushing you to get married. I will stand on top of this pulpit. I shall wave my hand now, right? I am not telling you you must get married. But please do not ignore these things in life. It will become a difficulty to bring up godly seed. Right? If God calls you to singlehood, then so be it. All right? So I want to make this very clear. I'm not matchmaking. I'm not telling you, please go get married. But I'm asking you to think. These are consequences of your delay if you know in your heart it's God's will for you to get married. Let us turn to God in prayer. What do we have here? Top 5 reasons why church dropouts, what church dropouts say, why they stop attending church. Now, please remember 66% of, well, I take the American view, they're the most readily available results. They stop attending church at least a year after turning 18. So from